position here. Catapults Kerry into the corner buckle. Fine move by Chris Adams with Gary Hart. Gary Hart giving instructions.
Okay, now stay aggressive.
Chris Adams trying to take control after Kerry Von Erich has done so well. Kerry turns it around. He's got the sleep hold. Another part of Kerry Von Erich's arsenal. And now Kerry goes to the sleep hold. See how Kerry is wrapped up. But Chris managed to break out a discus punch on the side of the head. And Chris may be gone. At the arms out, and look, Gary Hart. Gary Hart coming by to pull the leg over the bottom rope. A very quick move by Gary Hart. And now Kerry Von Erich is interested in Gary Hart. 10 minutes gone in this bout as Kerry Von Erich comes back up. Super kick. Kerry got his hands up and may have caught it right there. Kerry may have got the blow. Watch out, Gary Hart is on the rampage and hammers Kerry Von Erich. Gary Hart hammering Kerry Von Erich with his boot. There's a super kick. A super kick. Chris Adams, 1, 2, 3. Chris Adams and Gary Hart for the American Heavyweight Championship. Gary Hart interfering. Obviously interfering, but the referee blocked out, did not see it. The referee was giving Kerry Von Erich an opportunity, pushing Chris Adams away, and there was the blow by Gary Hart, and Kerry Von Erich has lost the American Championship. And let's go down to Mark Lawrence.
In 10.5 minutes, Chris Adams is the new American Heavyweight Champion.
That's the decision, and there is a fall on Kerry Von Erich as Gary Hart, who said he would bring fame and fortune to Chris Adams, was an instrumental part, no question about it. The world could see it, except Bronco Lubitsch could not see it, and Kerry Von Erich has lost the American Championship. Probably still wondering how it happened. Certainly the blow by the boot of Gary Hart gave him great pause there. Well, let's take a break. We'll be back with more on World Class Championship Wrestling in just a moment.
This is the Pro Wrestling Reflection Podcast with your host, the Professor Chalbelo Veracruz.
What a run!
Mr. Wonderful Tommy Wonder.
And I will take the powers of those that have no fear!
And the prodigal one, JB.
The queen, yeah. The cream of the crop.
Now it's time to go back in time in the time machine.
The American Dream! Dusty Rhodes! Too sweet!
The living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo! Look at this. He's running the ball. I don't believe it.
What's going on there, Reflectionites? What is going on there to the Vitoites? the Heyman-ites. I ain't gonna say the other because, like I said, I haven't seen anything on the other channel. Okay, I'm trying to be fair, I'm being transparent, but if you don't upload shit on your own shit, then why am I gonna say the shit? Because then I don't know what the hell's going on. Again, it could be a dictatorship. I understand the socialists, they take over channels. So you know what? For whatever purposes, it's taking over his channel, okay? But I still got love for him. I got love for Jimmy, but don't worry about it. But I can't say those-ites. But I do love that channel. But, the Democratic Socialist people took over his channel. So whatever, it is what it is. But you know what? We are an independent conglomerate here at the PWR Podcast, at Heyman Media Group, at Podbean.com. We are independent thinkers. We are independent through and through. We take some things from the left, we take some things from the right, and we meet it down the middle to the word common sense. Because you gotta take from one and another and bring it down, because that's called collective bargaining. Word of the day, boys and girls, collective bargaining. You can't get everything on one side. You can't get everything on the other side 100%. It doesn't work like that in the real world. It's called collective bargaining. You gotta give a little to get something back. But again, that's for another show, for another time, and another place, and another podcast. But this is the PWR Podcast. This is the Pro Wrestling Reflection Podcast here at the Heyman Media Group at Podbean.com, where I rep the Magnificent 7, the Elite 8, the Naughty 9, the Terrific 10, and all the Reflectionites all over the world. And I am the man, the oh-so-stunning one, the oh-so-effervescent one, but the oh-so-glorious one. And I'm still on my knees, not that way, TW, but I'm still on my knees praying that The Rock and Roman Reigns are going to fight at Wrestlemania. So this way, I get what I've been asking for since August of 2022, that Roman Reigns will eclipse Hulk Hogan's reign, and Cody will finish his story at Madison Square Garden in September of 2024. The way the Professor, that's my story. Finished my story. I don't care about Cody's story. I care about Dusty's story. It's the Professor and Dusty's story. We want MSG, and I want to be there, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm just praying, Rock, the board member, please make it so this way I can keep getting that reign closer, and I get September 2024 closer. But again, that's for the present. We talk about nostalgia here. But you know me, I'm the Professor of the Cruz, and I'm not here alone. No. I am here with my brother from another mother, the conservative liberal, the liberal conservative, I'm doing idiot's own, the iron stomach one, Dr. Freakenstein himself, too sexy for anybody to see his eyes because they're so zooted because he's high on weed in Detroit, Michigan. Woo! Tommy, wonder how you doing, my friend?
Look at that, my daughter just bought me this. What would Jesus do? Because I got baptized yesterday. I'm doing good. I got a question for you, though.
Namaste, TW. Namaste.
Namaste. When you win the Royal Rumble, you get to pick who you fight. And then isn't it usually whoever wins the Elimination Chamber fights the other guy?
No. It's the Elimination Chamber is very succinct. If it's for the Universal title number one contender, that's what they'll say. If it's the World Heavyweight title number one contender, that's what the Elimination Chamber will logistically say. The Royal Rumble winner is supposed to pick the heavyweight champion of whatever brand.
I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. All right.
Oh boy. Don't tell me something that's going to make me scared. I already prayed. I'm so close. I can smell it.
I think after the backlash from them doing absolutely nothing but having The Rock come out, there's no way they're making Cody wait till September. I think all of this, I even think there's a possibility that Seth isn't even really hurt. And that the reason they're saying he's hurt is so that Cody takes his time picking who he fights, because he has 63 days. Well, had 63 days. So I think they had The Rock come out. Cody still hasn't picked between Seth or Roman. And Cody told him, I'm coming for you, but not at WrestleMania. And I believe he said that because Rock is going to beat Roman at Perth at the Elimination Chamber. And then
don't do that. Don't do that to
challenge The Rock.
Don't do that to me. No. Don't do that to me. It doesn't make sense. My story. It's my story. TW, you're on my side. It's all about the Professor's story. I want Cody to win in MSG where Dusty was robbed in MSG in 19, I think.
But that's
76.
moving the goalpost, because what
I'm
they're
not
saying,
moving the goalpost.
what he said is he just wanted to main event WrestleMania. Check. He's about to main event it a second time. Check. And he wants the WWE World Heavyweight title. Now, if he does fight Seth and he wins that belt, it's going to be tainted. And if The Rock loses to Roman, fine. But they're making the internet is blowing up, making The Rock this huge bad guy, the new Vince, and he muscled his way in. And I'm like, no, here's what I think. I think it was obvious he was winning the Royal Rumble. The best thing that happened was Punk came in, but the worst thing was he got hurt, right? So Punk comes in. So I think, oh, shit, maybe Punk's going to win the Royal Rumble. Maybe they're going to take that pool AEW meme and make it Cody at the bottom of the pool and the mom catching Punk as he dives into the pool, and Drew is at the ass end bottom drowning. But I think they're doing all this so it's not obvious that he's going to win the title at WrestleMania, and they're dragging it out, and I think it's brilliant. Now, if they don't do that, and it actually is Cody versus Seth and Roman versus Rock, and I don't know if you said it or if I think I read it somewhere else, that they would unify the titles at SummerSlam. That's stupid.
I didn't
then they could never, ever bring a secondary title back again if they're going to unify the third belt that they made because the other two are already unified. So I think that's dumb. It's been
unified in 20 years 4 times, so it has nothing.
I know that they created a new belt and didn't split the other one, and it would have been better off just splitting it and then reunifying it. But it's backwards. So they got a new belt.
You see your problem here. You're making logic. You're making logic. I don't care about logic. See, this is what Billy Ray doesn't understand. I didn't book Roman Reigns to lose until September 2024. I just said he will lose in September 2024. I just gave a venue, and that's what the dream is.
What would that be? Hulk Hogan's first reign, wasn't it like 4.5 years?
No, 4 years. January 84 to February 88.
So 4 years and 1 month. And September will be 4 years for Roman?
Yeah, 4 years, and he will beat it. He needs a week. He'll need a week and a half to beat it in September. But again, that's my story.
Is there a show booked in New York in September?
No, that's the beauty. You could do Raw, SmackDown. You could do a PLE in MSG for Cody. This is what Dusty wants. Dusty has said it from the heavens.
You can't do Raw. He's Roman. He's on SmackDown.
Well, remember, they're gonna the TV contracts is done during that time. So whichever show is moving, SmackDown's moving to USA. So you could still do it on USA.
It is?
Yes.
I didn't know
that's the last one. So you know what? And I know people will be. I know Reflectionites.
So again, Fox is just out.
Fox is out. But when the Raw thing, whatever Netflix. They do now. This is the way I would do it. That makes a little bit of business sense. This is not about story sense. And Reflectionites will get into our show in just a second. But TW went with logic, and I'm hearing the logic. I just don't care about the logic. But again, for business purposes, TW, because of the TV contracts, I would do the MSG, everything that I said of MSG in October for the TV thing. Make sure that, you know what? If Raw is not going to be on USA anymore, TW, just for hindsight purposes, if they move to, let's say they NBC says, you know what, we'll pick it up, just out of graciousness, out of the business partnership. Could you imagine Cody against Roman on NBC primetime? I'm not saying it's gonna get 30 million like Saturday night's main event, like Hogan but I'm just saying, but at least that's something for people to tune on Raw on prime time, or for SmackDown's debut coming back to USA Network, Cody versus Roman. MSG right there. It works. Or the PLE, that makes everybody happy. It's a win-win-win. The professor wins, Cody wins, Dusty wins. But with that being said, that's the present Reflectionites. With the logic that TW brings, which I don't really care, and I respect it, but I don't care. It's my story. My story. Hashtag professor story. Finished my goddamn story. But anyway, we're not doing the present. We are doing the past. And TW, we're going episodic, episode 181. So Donnie, day one. I know sometimes, it'll be funny because Donnie doesn't listen to it every week. He binges it. We know how Donnie does. He'd be like, Professor, when you get to 200, because he knows how the professor operates. He'll binge it. he might miss it, the 200 episode, when we do it and when he binges it. That's the way I'm going to predict it. But I'm not a prognosticator, Donnie, but I know how you operate. But anyway, we are at episode 181 TW, 19 to go for the elusive 200.
It's my favorite number.
What?
19.
181.
It's my favorite number.
Oh, I thought 181 was your favorite number.
Who the fuck's favorite number is 3-digit?
How do I know? How do I know?
Maybe.
I'm just saying. But anyway, we're going episodic. We're going back to the time machines in 1985, and we are going back to World Class Championship Wrestling from February of 1985, and of course, it's in the infamous Dallas Sportatorium arena, but Sportatorium is not an arena; it's still an armory. But whatever the case may be. But TW, before we even talk about what we saw in this show, we have to always do this. The ambiance of the Sportatorium, and you can see it in 1985, because again, we have to merge a lot of things that happen. And the reason I picked this was, maybe about a month ago, TW, I saw the movie, the Von Erich movie. Did you see the Von Erich movie yet?
I have not seen it. My buddy wanted me to do it, and then he never brought it up again all of December or January. So I asked him the other day. We're going to probably try to see it soon, but I don't know when.
All right. Well, again, there was a lot of creative licensing in that movie, and they kind of like mishmashed. I think I told you this. They mishmashed like chronological history just to fit the movie, and certain things did not make sense. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We will do a future PWR at the movies with the Von Erichs. That'll be the most present movie we ever do. But I just thought it was apropos to do a World Class Championship Wrestling episode. And from 1985, remember, it's a couple of months after David Von Erich passed away too soon. It will be maybe a couple of months. I forget it's mostly in 86, where two tragedies happened. Mike Von Erich's seizure and Kerry Von Erich's foot. He loses his foot because of a motorcycle accident. So again, the Von Erich curse has ebbs and flows from 84 to 86. But in the middle of it is 1985. And another thing that happens, I don't know if you want to call it a Von Erich curse, but we are in the last legs of the relationship between Fritz Von Erich being, I'm not going to say a board member or so, but a member of the National Wrestling Alliance Syndicate board of directors. Because remember, TW, Texas was part of the NWA Syndicate, of touring for Ric Flair to like go to Dallas. He goes to Florida. He goes to St. Louis and all that stuff. And Fritz Von Erich, you could see the frustration of Fritz Von Erich trying, because technically in this episode alone, and don't talk about who's the champions then, there's two titles. There's a Texas Heavyweight Championship, right? Which coincidentally, Reflectionites, if I translate it, is either the U.S. Heavyweight title or the Intercontinental title. It's like the Workhorseman title. And the number one title in Texas is the American Heavyweight Champion, the NWA American Heavyweight Champion. That's the number one contender to Ric Flair's title in 1985. But again, TW, we know logistically, the U.S. champion is the number one contender, no matter where the territories is. He's the number one contender, regardless. But you know that Fritz is very frustrated with his relationship with like the Crockett's and the Barnetts and everybody and the Grahams and stuff like that, because he felt that his boys could take the NWA to the next level. So what say you about everything that's going on? I know I put a lot out there, but whatever I said, try to figure put it all together.
A text just came through at the top of the screen. I'm not used to that happening when I do this podcasting. It's usually at the bottom, and it's coming from the top because I got it turned. Anyway, that's just almost made me laugh. But so it's funny because that's one of the first things I thought about was like there's a Texas champ and a U.S. champ, and I thought the Texas heavyweight champion was their big belt. But then I thought, well, it can't be if there's a America's champion, right? And so it makes me question something to you, because obviously Fritz is no different than Lawler would be. Their territory, and Fritz wants his guy to be the man. Jerry Lawler probably wanted him to be the man. Whoever, Vern, if he was part of it at one point, wanted his guy to be the man. So they're all going to want their guy to be the man. But where was Flair based out of? Was he based out of Carolinas and the Crockett's in general? So he was a Crockett guy. So he's mad at them for doing what he wants to do anyway. They're using their guy. It's no different than him putting the belt on his kid because he can control it. Flair is the Crockett's kid at this point. They trust him. He's done good business, so of course he's going to be the guy. I don't like the formula, and I think a lot of wrestling fans in hindsight look back at it and go, how could I be so stupid to think wrestling was real when literally every year Ric Flair loses the belt to somebody and wins it back almost at the same exact time. I lose it here and win it back at Starrcade. Lose it at Starrcade, win it back at the Bad. Whatever. It was always the same window.
Well, think about it, because in '84 he lost the belt to Kerry Von Erich at the Parade of Champions, and then regained it not like a couple of months later, 3 weeks later in Tokyo, Japan. So it's apropos about what you talk about with the business sense and the trustworthy, being trustworthy for the NWA board to say Ric Flair can go to these towns, go to Tokyo, go to Puerto Rico, go to Mexico. They trust him to bring asses to seats. They trust him to bring the gate.
To show up.
Well, that too. So,
And I'll say this. There's not a bigger Kerry Von Erich fan than me. None. Right there. I got another figure down there and another one on the way. But Kerry Von Erich, I think they let him win that belt because David was going to win it. They did it as a respect thing. And the reason they took it off him right away was because anybody you talk to about Kerry Von Erich he was heavily medicated in the back always. So he wasn't professional. I went to high school with a guy. He was the youngest of the 3 Amin brothers, Ralph Amin. And ironically, he was the best of the 3. And I would say between David, Kevin, and Kerry, Kerry's the best of them, like the blue chip, if you will, like the most natural. So the 2 older Amin brothers are in the Ring of Honor at U of M for wrestling there. And they went to my high school. They coach there now. I don't know if they still do, but they did a few years after I graduated. And Ralph was the best of them all, but he didn't want to do it. He only did it because his dad made him basically do it. And he was always high. We would hang out at Taco Bell. We called it Jocko Bell. All the athletes would hang out in the Taco Bell parking lot on Friday night, Saturday night. And one time I remember I was in a car. I look over, and we didn't know each other well. He was 2 grades ahead of me, but we knew each other from wrestling as far as he at least recognized me, and I obviously knew who he was. He was a popular guy. And I look over at him, and he looks at me, and it took everything he had to say hi because he was so blown out on weed, if it was just weed. And now that I'm older, I get it. He hated every second of it. He was good at it. He did it out of expectation, and I think that's what Kerry was.
Did he do it to appease his father just to make sure that?
Yes, and I think that's what Kerry was. Do I think Kerry enjoyed it? Yes. Do I think he loved it? No. I think he loved that shot putting. I think he loved football. I think he loved a lot of other things, and wrestling was it's the opposite of The Rock. Kerry probably could have gone somewhere with something else, but chose to do wrestling because of his dad, whereas The Rock went to do something else and got hurt and ended up wrestling. And that's why I think The Rock made the best of it because, same thing with Goldberg, same thing, all these guys who wanted to be NFL players but got hurt. Wrestling was like a second chance at glory, if you will, whereas Kerry, it was predestined. And I just think he didn't I don't think he liked the pressure of it. So when Flair wins the belt back in 3 weeks instead of like Ronnie Garvin got it longer, I think it's because of a trust thing. They were afraid that if they waited too long, Kerry's not giving it back because he's going to be whatever, not around.
Well, remember, again, logistically, Reflectionites and TW, that 85 is technically like the last, let's just say the last legs of the territory agreement, if you will, for Ric Flair to go to Texas or Ric Flair to go to Florida and all that stuff before the Crockett's really put the stranglehold and kept that NWA title because basically, Jim Crockett was buying most of the shares of the NWA, and there was really no other reason to keep having Ric Flair, put asses in seats without, he got a finder's fee, but it's not enough because he didn't get the whole game. He just got Ric Flair's money, and if Ric Flair got 10,000, what would you, as an agent, you get 10% of his 10,000. That's not enough. You want to book Ric Flair yourself in the venue. You don't want to just rent Ric Flair out.
Right.
If you get the agent fee, you do the math, TW. I'd rather promote Ric Flair for my company in my venues and stadiums and arenas and all over the country and stuff like that. But that being said, again, this is a very topsy-turvy time for world-class championship wrestling. Of course, TW, we always know that we don't know the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, we find out, after the fact. But when you look at it on TV, and again, we've said this, and I want you to harp on it again, the production. And again, we have to give kudos to Von Erichs or Fritz himself, because for what he did with the Sportatorium, again, it could probably hold 500, 1,000, maybe 1,500 when the Von Erichs was really golden. The Freebirds against the Von Erichs was golden and all that stuff. But it can only hold so much. That's why you had to go to the Reunion Arena. That's why you had to go to the Cotton Bowl. That's why you had to go to Texas Stadium, all that stuff, TW. So let's say about Fritz giving that ambiance with the Sportatorium itself, making it must-see.
When I watch it, it reminds me of UWF, and it felt real. It felt like a sport. It didn't feel like, I mean, they did have some production stuff and whatever, and they kept saying they were the only promotion watched around the world or whatever. But every time we've done a Von Erich show or a world class show, I thought there were more people there than. So when you're sitting here saying 1,500, I'm like, what? There's like 20,000 screaming chicks. What are you talking about? But they do such a good job of making whatever building they use, they fill it, and they do it right. They do the Sportatorium, which is probably. We're looking at on TV like it's the Silverdome, but the reality is it's probably the local high school gym, but it just feels bigger.
Well, right? Armory. It's an armory.
Yeah, an armory. And so then when you see, it's ironic you say Cotton Bowl, because that was the next thing that played after this episode ended for me was the Cotton Bowl, and it came off like Wrestlemania, like the guy singing the national anthem. I shut it off. I didn't see which one it was, but they just it felt real, man. And another thing I want to say is Roy Mercer. Is that the name of the guy? Ron Mercer?
Roy.
We never brought him up when we did the best commentators. And they didn't bring him up on the OVB podcast about best commentators. He's good in the fact that he does it alone, and you don't realize he's doing it alone until 5-6 minutes in. You're like, there's no one else. And he doesn't fall asleep. He sells it. And then
I don't know about. Well, he might not fall asleep, but he makes you fall asleep. I mean, his voice.
I know that, but I'm saying he stays engaged. He might be boring, but I'm saying he's so involved with it. I didn't even realize he was alone until probably the second match, and I'm like, "There's no one else." Because I remember as a kid, Gary Hart would be sitting there with him, or somebody Akbar would be sitting there with him. He always had someone who would antagonize him. But it was just him. And then the ring announcer, Todd Llewellyn or whatever his name was.
No, Mark Lawrence.
Mark Lawrence. He fucking phoned it in every time. You're a new Texas champion. Blah, blah. Gino. I'm like, fuck. Why don't you say about you're mad that he won? Because that's what he was trying to do, was like be upset that the heel won, right? Yeah, right. Still the champion. Blah. But he just sounded like he hated being there.
Oh my God! Now I won't get that out of my head, because now I'm gonna have to watch another world class just to hear Mark Lawrence's nasal twang voice just to announce, and there is still champion with no excitement and shit like that. But let's get to the show here, TW. And again, the first match is kind of like a recap, but it's kind of like the main event, because they start the main event first. So why start, why watch the whole rest of the show when it's really the main event here? But anyway, neither here nor there. It was for the Americas Heavyweight Championship. Kerry Von Erich was defending the championship against gentleman Chris Adams, who was managed by Gary Hart. Again, you could call him, would you say he's the Bobby Heenan of World Class, or the Jimmy Hart? Because again, to me, Devastation Incorporated with Skandar Akbar is the Bobby Heenan to me, because that's the number one in my opinion. So then Gary Hart would be the Jimmy Hart, not because his last name is Hart, but in terms of stature, in terms of maybe champions, he can produce. He had a quality staff of dudes.
I would say Gary Hart was more of a like luscious Johnny V, right?
But now you're insulting him. I think he's Jimmy Hart.
No, I think the number one guy was Heenan, the number two guy was Jimmy Hart, and sometimes you could flip that.
No, I get that, but that's why I'm saying in world class, Skandar Akbar is Heenan, but Gary Hart is Jimmy Hart. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know that they have a Jimmy Hart. If they do, it's Percy Pringle. You know, Gary Hart was just consistent, and that's what Johnny V was. He was always with the same people, and he basically was consistent. He was the same all the time. Johnny Valiant, even though he ended up being a puss in the end, he was a big enough guy that you thought he could get in there, and he did. He would wrestle in six-mans with Beefcake and Valentine, and then I think he managed somebody else, but I can't remember who it was. Was it Dino Bravo for a minute? It was Dino Bravo, yeah. And then he went to Jimmy Hart or Frenchie Martin or whatever. But Gary Hart was intimidating on his own. Heenan and Jimmy Hart, nobody was afraid of those guys, right? And but Gary Hart almost came across almost like a DDP before he wrestled when he had the Diamond Exchange. Like he could handle himself too if he needed to, but he had these badasses, so he didn't have to. But I wouldn't say, like, even personality wise, he was more of a Paul Ellering than a wise ass. He was a strategic guy.
Yeah. I get you. I'm looking at it from a stature standpoint.
But Akbar's public enemy number one, which is Heenan, which is Jim Cornette or J.J. Dillon. Actually, I would say he's like a J.J. Dillon. Cornette was your main, heat seeker. J.J. was the guy you just thought was somebody that was a lawyer that came out and talked for them. And that's what I think Gary Hart was like a representative rather than a manager.
Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just look at it from a standpoint of like the Heenan and Jimmy Hart. I thought he was maybe number two, but then, the Percy Pringle factor. Yeah, you're right. So someone's got to be Fuji. So, either, well, I guess maybe Gary Hart's Fuji. I don't know. I'm just saying because he did manage the Great Kabuki and the Super Ninja. So I get Gary Hart is Mr. Fuji in world class. But with that being said, TW, one thing that, the Von Erichs, the good part of maybe the bad part of the Von Erichs is there wasn't a lot of antagonizers, because for the Von Erichs, the best ones were the Freebirds, but you couldn't fight them every week for 52 weeks out of the year, 365 days out of the year, and all that stuff, because it would get monotonous and boring, and it did, because as the years waned, the magic was gone. So Fritz had no choice but to create new antagonizers, and Gentleman Chris Adams, who had the super kick, very agile, but also gave the appearance of an international superstar because he's from Great Britain and all that stuff. But they try to make him an antagonizer. And again, one of the best world-class feuds is himself and Kevin Von Erich. But Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez did fight Kerry and Kevin for the tag team titles. But again, that's logistics. But they were trying to make new antagonizers for the Von Erichs. And I kind of, I get why they did it for Gino, because Gino had, and we'll talk about him later, Gino had it. He had the it factor, he had the charisma to be an asshole. But a lot of people have said this, and I'm not saying anything disrespectful to you. Chris Adams, he was forcing himself to be an asshole, and it was not in his nature. He was a good guy. He was Steamboat.
He was gentleman Chris Adams.
That too, and
he was my favorite wrestler at one point, dude. He was class.
Right, he was classy and all that. He was the class gentleman and all that stuff. You can put him with Gary Hart, and Gary Hart can give you all that heat. But for the fan, for the consumer TW, I don't think they believed it. I don't think they grasped it. So what say you about Chris Adams, gentleman Chris Adams?
In 1985, Chris Adams is the personification of white meat babyface. He was what all those girls wanted to cheer for. He was a good-looking guy. He was in shape, and he had a look of a guy who saw the inside of a gym but didn't live in it. And then Gino Hernandez, what he had going for him was that last name. So it's a lot easier to hate people back then because they were Hispanic or black or whatever. They're like Iceman Parsons got good heat down there, but he was also a guy that they loved one minute and hated the next. But Chris Adams, it just always felt, like you said, forced. He didn't look comfortable as a bad guy. Like Rick Martel in the beginning as the model didn't, but grew into it. Chris Adams never grew into it. He always just looked like the guy that would help an old lady cross the street, and the British accent.
Right. But before we get into the match itself, TW, you've always said it's easier to be the bad guy because you can get the heat and, you can be an asshole and it's just more natural, and then the people will love you and all that stuff. Why do you think it was hard for Chris Adams to do something that's, like you said, so easy that most wrestlers would love to do? They'd rather be the bad guy.
Because I'll tell you why. You got to have it in you. We all want to be an asshole. Chris Adams didn't. That's the bottom line. Like,
okay.
To me, it was venting. Like everything I hated about my day job, or everything I hated about the weather outside, how long it took me to get to that town. It was funny to me to just bury people in the audience, right? And it was. But the problem is, if they already like you, they're not going to boo you. They're just not. And look at how many people in wrestling today where they try to turn heel and it just doesn't work because they end up, I don't want to pick on AEW, but there's guys there that are good guy 1 week, bad guy the next, and then back to a good guy a week later because the fans just don't buy it. Like they like you. It's a different day and age than back then. But and the other thing about World Class is, you just said they got sick of the Freebirds. There's a chance they got sick of the Dan Von Erichs because they were always the heel or baby faces. Almost everybody in the matches with them with feuds were their friend first. Gino turned on him. Chris Adams turned on him. Brian Diaz is on this show. He turned on him. Everyone, the Freebirds turned on him. Like everybody turned on the Dan Von Erichs. So like you were saying about Hogan, at some point maybe the audience is like, they're the common denominator. Maybe they're the asshole and the other guys just got sick of them. But Chris Adams is just, he's such a likable guy, and that British accent to this day, when you hear women talk about Hugh Grant or the other Clive, whatever, Clive Owen,
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. He reminds me of Pierce Brosnan. He's Remington Steele at that time. Chris Adams, when I was a kid, I was like, that's Remington Steele. He's just someone you want to cheer for, so you can't boo him. I think Daniel Bryan was a guy where they turned him heel and he ended up babyface again because it's too late. They love you. Once you are adored by them, like it's probably a good thing Ricky Steamboat never turned heel because he's so likable, it wouldn't last long. The people would end up just cheering him anyway.
Again, you and I can see it, that it just felt forced, and maybe he just didn't relish it. It's an easy thing. It's an easy gimmick to be the asshole. I mean, but I guess like
if you have it in you.
If you have it in you, but of course I think it's like I don't want to say the Bret Hart syndrome or the hero syndrome, but if you feel like you could be the hero, if you want to, influence the kids in a positive direction, you feel like I have the platform to do that.
Cena.
Maybe I have the platform to do it and I want to do it. I want to make sure the kids go in the right direction and all that stuff. So, it is what it is. So what say you about this match for the America's Heavyweight Champion, which with outside help from Gary Hart with it was funny. The ending was funny to me because you remember how we could always say the DDT was very devastating, that you go down quickly. This match actually broke a myth, debunked a myth, because the super kick, you did it once, it was done. Chris Adams did it twice. He kicked him out of the ring, but then Kerry no-sold it. It took a boot and then another super kick. So he did it twice. So I'm not nitpicking TW. But for the marktards right now that will, and sometimes I say to myself, it takes about 4 super kicks. It takes about 3 Canadian destroyers. It takes 3 DDTs to get the win now. It took 2 super kicks. So that says something.
And a boot to the head.
And a boot to the head to defeat Kerry Von Erich and become the new America's Heavyweight Champion. So what say you about the match overall?
It's to protect Kerry. It's to get heat on Chris Adams. I think the big thing that's not giving him heat is Gary Hart looks like someone's nice uncle with his little balding haircut. He didn't shave his head yet, and that's bald Gary Hart is the guy you're afraid of. This guy looks like the dad on Throwing Family Ties.
No, you said it. He looked like an accountant. He looked like He looked like an accountant.
Yeah, lawyer.
Yeah. So he needed
Kerry.
to be bold.
Kerry took a nice bump. The hardest part for this whole match for me is seeing Kerry with 2 boots, like 2 regular boots, and a couple times he's squatting back on his leg, and I'm like, man, if he'd have did that on the other one, it would have broke, Like I can't look at Kerry and not look at that damn leg. And to see it without the tassels and see it normal, it was distracting. But I tell you this, I say it every time we watch some old shit, and it's not just this match. It's definitely the Midnight Express match. I think Gino Hernandez's match, not your favorite wrestler Buck Zumov's. These matches are too long. They're way too long. And I said that it's a combination of.
But this is an hour show, TW. This is an hour show.
4 matches, 15 minutes each. I get it.
What's wrong with that?
Today's fan is not sitting there. That's why every time someone does an Iron Man match, I'm like, yeah, this is getting a boring chant. And some of them pull it off. They had to shrink it to a half-hour Iron Man match. But the longer a match goes on, most of the guys in today's business could not hold the audience. Guys back then could, but these matches, there's something about that Texas audience that just, they are all in, all match. And it works. It wouldn't work now.
Yeah, I guess it would. So, with that being said, with this match, again, we got a new America's Heavyweight Champion, which coincidentally looks like a television champion, which was worn by the greatest.
Or Hulk Hogan's that AEW or that world title in '85 Hogan had.
But it's still the TV title. You know that. It's all about Arn Anderson's TV title, no matter what. But anyway, no, it's Arn. But anyway, neither here nor there. So it was a good main event to start off the program. It started off hot. You can't start off a program hotter than having the #1 title in world class to start off the show. That's just my humble opinion. So the next match within this hour-long show is not my favorite wrestler. It's TW's favorite wrestler, Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff against the one-man gang, who was also managed by Gary Hart. So again, the Mr.
Terrible gear.
That's all you got out of it? Terrible gear.
His UWF look is iconic. When he first got to WWE, it's iconic. Akeem is hilarious, but it was dumb. But it was hilarious.
Okay.
But that one-man gang look with the denim jacket, vest over the t-shirt with the skull and crossbones, his mohawk, and his tattoos on the side of his head.
Wait. To be fair here. He was honing the one-man gang look because, again, if you want to be fair, because in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken, Reflectionites, people can correct me, but I am the professor, so I'm 90% sure about this, TW. He had flowing long hair. He looked like Norman the Lunatic. Yeah, him too. He had long flowing mullet hair, and he had a singlet. So he did not perfect his look. So right then and there in 1985, he found something. He, shaved half of his head off and all that stuff. He didn't perfect his mohawk just yet until the UWF days. He got the denim jacket. He had to change his look because to be a fat guy with a mullet and a singlet, he wasn't going to separate from the bunch. He was a 400 pound. Yeah, he was a 400-pound dude, but he just didn't have no look. So with this is a starting point. I agree. It wasn't perfected yet, but why do I need to perfect my look when I'm facing Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff?
He had a shirt underneath it, like Sergeant Slaughter used to wear. It was horrible.
That too, but why am I going to perfect my look against Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff, the pedophile? So, again, and Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff, like you said eloquently for many episodes, Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff is the man of the hour in AWA, but goes to a different territory and turns into the jobber like he did in WWF. Like here he did for World Class Championship reps. It was a squash match, no matter what. And you know why Rock and Roll was a jobber here? He didn't bring his radio. I didn't hear nothing. I mean, Ron Mercer was talking about
where he had it.
I didn't see it.
I heard him talking about the radio.
They talked about it, but it just looked like he just went down the ring
box or whatever they said.
In AWA, Rock and Roll Buck Zumoff flourished because they allowed him to bring the boombox down. They allowed him to play that god-awful rock and roll Beach Boy music. But in World Class, it just looked like, okay, he's just there. Do you remember a boombox? Right. Do you remember WWF, him having the boombox? I don't remember.
Him and Brad Brangens were already in the ring. Brad Brangens.
Already in the ring. So that just showed you that this was not a main event. So with that being said, TW, of course it's a squash match. Of course he's going to win with the 747 splash. So what say you about, again, I guess it's more about the look about One Man Gang. We're more into the look of One Man Gang because, again, he hasn't perfected it yet, but he knows he's like, to me, it's like this. I'm getting closer with the look. I just have to perfect it. The mohawk wasn't just there yet. The denim jacket, I wasn't a fan of the denim jacket, and I'm not a fan of the chain. So what say you, TW, about this match, or maybe the look of the One Man Gang?
He squashed him, and then after he squashed him and he got announced a winner, he beat him up some more. It was like straight jobber, right? And the funny thing is, I thought it didn't dawn on me that it was world class, and I thought he had the boombox. I saw him pointing at everything, and Mercer was talking about him like he was something, but he absolutely got squashed, and Mercer even made excuses for it, like, well, he's getting manhandled because he's about 2 to 3 times the size of him, blah 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 blah. And then he beat him up after, and it almost came across as on purpose, like not part of the show. Like he was like, "Fuck you, buddy!" Like he was mad at Buck for doing something in there. Maybe he was saw him by some kids or something. I don't know. Took it out on him.
Yeah. So again, it is what it is, and of course. Another thing, the aspect about One Man Gang Reflectionites was that he was managed by Gary Hart. So Gary Hart had a stable. So he was Mr. Fuji. I guess now TW's convinced me that he wasn't Jimmy Hart. He was Mr. Fuji because, again, like I said, he managed the Great Kabuki and he managed the Super Ninja, and now he has all these people. So with that being said, we'll go into, again, another singles match and technically another squash match, TW. But again, it doesn't really matter. But it was the Texas heavyweight champion, or I don't know if the angle was he wasn't the real Texas champion because he kept saying, "I'm your Texas champion." So it felt like to me that he wasn't the Texas champion, but he had his own belt. And that just proves to me he is untapped potential that he could have been a main eventer in WWF.
He was the Texas champ because Ray Mercer says, "Oh yeah," like he said, he was basically claiming to be the people's champion is what he was.
Oh, okay. I thought he was,
but as a heel. Right.
But with that being said, TW, this man is full of untapped potential. This man, it's Gino Hernandez against Mark Maron. And that, again, it just doesn't matter because he won the match. But let's just talk about Gino Hernandez here. It more of a what if scenario, TW. With all the charisma, the it factor and all that stuff, technically Gino Hernandez reminded me about, supposedly your greatest TV champion. He reminds me of Tully Blanchard, even though they kind of like intersected with each other in the Texas organizations. In Tully Blanchard's dad's promotion, they actually, I don't know, were tag team partners or they were rivals against each other, but neither here nor there. But what say you, TW, about the potential of Gino Hernandez? Do you think he could have made it in the WWF? Do you think he could have made it in the NWA? What say you?
He was absolutely NWA stuff. He had NWA written all over.
And when I say, technically, when I say that, I'm talking about Crockett's NWA because we know that was the number one.
Moved
NWA.
up from world class. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A call up. I think there was actually rumblings of him being the next Ric Flair, or at least associated with the Horsemen, and he died. But and that's what I think they were doing with Chris Adams too. They were trying, like you said, it's on the ass end of this whole agreement with the Crockett's. They were trying to build their own Ric Flairs, and that's what they always tried to make Gino come across as. Was because to me, I said a million times, Tully is Ric Flair-esque, and he was the Mid-Atlantic champion or whatever that other belt was, and then he was the TV champ, the greatest of all time, and then he was a U.S. champ. He had all them belts. It was to keep him to stop going after Ric Flair. That was his pacifier, if you will, and then they left. So I think that would have been the perfect time once Tully and Arn left to bring in Gino and Chris Adams to be with Flair and Luger or whoever the other Horseman was when – I can't remember. Was it Wyndham? It was Wyndham. Yeah, when they left to go to WWE. But Gino had so much potential, and I think it wasn't going to be untapped. They were going to tap it, but he died. And a lot of dead guys in this episode. 3 of them so far.
Yes, of course, you know that TW is the gatekeeper. He keeps a list.
I think Gary Hart's dead too.
Yes, he is. I know that much. He died, but he lived a full life. So, in comparison to Gino Hernandez, who, when you live fast and die young, TW, again, it's another example of the state of world class, because again, with the Von Erich deaths and you had the Gino Hernandez death like that, you lose your top stars so soon. So it affects the business, the bottom line in a bad way, because you want to see these guys, every week on your TV in Dallas, Texas. And then when they die abruptly, we could say next man up, TW, but how do you replace a David Von Erich? They couldn't do it. How do you replace a Gino Hernandez? You couldn't really do it. So
you know what they tried to do? Because Mike Von Erich, they kept saying he's a spitting image of his older brother David. I'm like, the fuck he is. Like, what? He's not even. He's like the size of his leg. Like Kerry's your Adonis, right? But again, you can't trust him. And Kevin is the one that just gets the shaft. Like they're just bypassing him to go right to Kerry or Mike. It's like
he's the most professional. He's the most professional robot out of the bunch.
Yeah, but with no boots. That's his problem. And one more thing about Rock and Roll Buck Zumha. Yeah, nobody should be surprised about what we found out about that guy, because that son bitch wrestled with no knee pads and looked like a perverted uncle that snuck in the room of a slumber party. There's no good in wrestlers that don't wear knee pads. None.
I swear, I think I saw Buck Zumhofe on To Catch a Predator with Chris Hansen, but again, neither hit.
Was it your house?
Hell no. What the hell? No, don't implicate me with Buck Zumhofe. No. They're 18 and over. But anyway, neither here nor there. But let's go on to the ending of the show. You could call it the main event, but I don't feel it's the same way like Kerry Von Erich, Chris Adams. But it was a tag team contest with the American Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express, managed by Jim Cornette. And TW, we have to remember this. Jim Cornette was in the Dallas territories not only to become the America's Tag Team Champions, but they were also going to be going after the Von Erichs, who were the current Trios Tag Team Champions. And of course, Mama Cornette, was spending money for the top Texas, you could say villain. I think who did they get? They got, was it Matt Bourne or Buzz Sawyer? But neither here nor there. But they were recruiting a third member for the Midnight Express to chase the Von Erichs for the Trios Championship. But
Rip Oliver.
Rip Oliver. Oh, he's a Rip Oliver guy. No disrespect, Vet, but I forgot. I thought it was Buzz Sawyer, but it's Rip Oliver. But this match, there was a backstory. It was the Midnight Express and the American Tag Team Champions. It was a non-title match, but they were going up against Mike Von Erich and Brian Adidas. But the story, TW, was about Jim Cornette and Sunshine. I don't remember Sunshine having anything to do with the Von Erichs. I think she was more on Brian Adidas' jock, but that's just me. But Sunshine was the good valet. Precious was the bad valet. Sunshine was, the Texas sweetheart good valet. And of course, the valet and Jim Cornette thing kind of manifested in 1986 with Baby Doll, that Jezebel, and Jim Cornette. So kind of like they spun the wheel. Well, the Crockett's respun that wheel because it was successful, because Jim Cornette has that face. He has that face of the nerd that can't get the girl, but also will insult the girls. So what say you about the whole package of this match?
Other than their gear and the Midnight Express looking like already in the ring guys, Cornette was good. Like, I don't think, obviously the modern day wrestling fan hates him because they don't like his takes. And that guy and I probably disagree on everything outside of wrestling, but in wrestling, there is some times where, these young wrestling fans who are 35 in their mom's basement, they ain't young, where they say you don't want to let go of your grandpa's wrestling. There are times when he comes across that way. But when you're watching it as a kid, you're so focused on not liking what he's saying that you don't realize how good Jim Cornette was on a microphone. And proof in the pudding, until Stan Lane, do you remember a fucking word Bobby Eaton or Dennis Condrey ever said? No, because they never said shit. It was always Cornette. Bubba Rogers, when they finally let him talk, you're like, okay, fucking, I see why Jim Cornette's with him. And then Jim Cornette would do the talking. Like, he just sounded excited and talked in circles. He's the Bobby Heenan of there. If it's not Akbar, in the fact that A, you want to beat the shit out of him, and B,
but
you could.
He couldn't be the Bobby Heenan because he was going from Texas
Right.
to Bill Watts territory,
He's
and
a
then
traveling
eventually
salesman.
he's Rick. He's the free agent. He's the guy that, you know. But he was working the territories to get to Carolina, to get to the Crockett land, and then get all that kind of money. So, you know, technically the Midnight Express, they paid their dues. I understand that you talk about the gear not matching, and I know you're a stickler for that, but they were paying their dues in the Watts territory in Texas. And of course, you know, in Watts territory, they had the Rock and Roll Express. In Texas, they had the Fantastic. And of course, in the Crockett's, you had both the Fantastic and the Rock and Roll Express. But in this match, Reflectionites, again, this is against Mike Von Erich and Brian Adias. And Adias, or whatever, but I don't care. But the ending is really not it doesn't matter about Brian Adias and Mike Von Erich, because the move that they did was very horrible. It was the spot between Sunshine and Jim Cornette, because Sunshine saved Mike Von Erich from the tennis racket shot with the slap. That was a hard slap for Jim Cornette because he sold it like gold. But the move, but the tag team move felt sort of like, you talk about like no synergy. Mike Von Erich and Brian Adias is not Strikeforce.
I was stunned when they won. Just absolutely stunned. I should have not been, because they said not entitled, and they were pushing Mike like he's the second coming of David. But I was stunned because they both look like two guys already in the ring.
They're a Von Erich. It's a Von Erich in the ring, so you got to get the win. They only lose when the title's on the line or they can't get the titles. But what say you about this match overall?
It's fucking too long. It's long as shit. Bobby Eaton looks like
this was
his
the
grandma's
last match.
Girdle over the top of his mom's dress, and then Dennis Condrey looks like he thinks he's the Flash. And by the way, the only guy in the '80s who made Ole Anderson not look 100 was Dennis Condrey. He looked 190 years old. And the fact that he's still going, he outlived Bobby Eaton, this old motherfucker. But yeah, they did not look good. Bobby Eaton didn't look good. There was a referee that I thought was Tom Pritchard, because I do remember Tom Pritchard reffing for them, but it ended up not being him. But I think that was in the Gino match. But it was an okay match, and the crowd was in it from start to finish. They popped for the finish. But man, it was long. So long. And Precious is not pretty.
Well, that's Sunshine. That wasn't Precious.
Whatever the fuck. Precious is pretty. Sunshine's not pretty.
But again, with the ambiance of the Sportatorium and the excitement of the Texas fans, this was technically a great hour of wrestling Reflectionites. Even though that TW, you know, we all nitpick because, again, we're watching this in hindsight and we're watching this like, God damn, what did they do? Again, I nitpick because they made the Young Stallions look like Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, because Mike Von Erich and Brian Adias did not have.
First of all, motherfucker, the Young Stallions are good. I don't know why you would even.
I'm giving them credit. I'm giving them credit. They're not
jobbers, and then they made a tag team. I was in heaven when they made the Young Stallions a tag team.
I'm just saying that this team of Adias and Mike Von Erich don't even match the Young Stallions. I'm giving them all the credit in the world.
To be fair, neither did the Midnight Express. They look like a couple job guys thrown in there too.
But again, they were paying their dues, and you knew they weren't going to be there long. But they had a track record. They had a resume being, you know, like I said, Bill Watts territory. They were the Mid-South Tag Team Champions. To be in Texas and already the American Tag Team Champions, it says something. And of course, they go to the Crockett's and they become, you know, what they are. And of course, Stan Lane, you know, you've already said it. Stan Lane makes it the better Midnight Express, not Dennis Condrey, because I think Stan Lane was into the look itself too. I think Stan Lane. I don't think people give Stan Lane a lot.
He had charisma.
Well, that too. I'm just saying. I think Stan Lane put a lot more emphasis on the overall look of the Midnight Express more than Dennis Condrey. I think Dennis Condrey said, "Fuck it, I don't give a damn. You know, let Bobby wear what he wants. If he's comfortable, I'm comfortable. I don't give a fuck." So again, you could. We've seen Texas Midnight Express. We've seen Bill Watts Midnight Express. They didn't have the same kind of, you know, emphasis on their look.
Power.
Well, that too. Like Stan Lane makes, because again, Stan Lane was a fabulous one. He knew about the marketing ability. He knew about brand awareness and all that stuff. And with that being said, we close on this episodic episode number 181, World Class Championship Wrestling from February of 1985. And what we're going to do next time, I don't know, maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks, because the professor has to do something, real life situations. I have to venture, I have to edify, but you already know that the professor does something in real life. But maybe in a week or two, who knows? It's time to settle this, TW. It's time to settle this. No matter what. You keep digging me and I dig you back, even though I dig the truth. But we know who the greatest television champion of all time is. And that man's name is AA Arn Anderson. So we have to settle this. We must do a PWR debate special. It's not about who wins. We're not talking about who's going to have all the votes and all that stuff. The Reflectionites, they might love TW more than the professor, or they might love the professor more than TW. But we're gonna iron this out. It's gonna be a PWR special. Who is the greatest television champion of all time? It's either Arn Anderson or Tully Blanchard. What say you, TW, about that idea? A debate special. We might do more debates, but we know that this debate has got to be settled.
It has to be settled, and it's you have to come around, and someday you will. And Bobby Eaton's going to be a part of this discussion. There's going to be a lot of people that we talked about today that are going to be part of this discussion. But at the end of the day, you are going to say, you know what, TW? You're right. I concede Tully is the greatest world television champion of all times.
Hell no. You're going to concede to the professor saying that Arn Anderson is the greatest television champion of all time, that it was made for him. He had more designs than Tully Blanchard ever with the belt. But again,
Tully only needed one. That one, the red one, the second prettiest belt of all times.
All I'm saying, TW, is we're going to settle this. A debate special. I don't know if this is going to be a running theme, because maybe we'll think of greatest heavyweight champions, maybe greatest intercontinental champions, but this debate must be settled. Tully Blanchard, what's that?
Greatest chase for a belt.
Well, that's a different debate for another day.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're gonna do the PWR Spotlight debate special between me and TW, the greatest television champion of all time. It's either Arn Anderson, me, or Tully Blanchard. No way. Me. But anyway, TW, give out those socials so we can get out of here.
Alrighty, so we're not doing the first one?
No.
All right, so you can find us at Hameen Media Group at podbean.com or HMG at channelattitude.com. Our podcast is represented on X at PW Reflection. You can find Big Ray Hernandez everywhere on social media at Big Ray Hernandez. It's that simple, at Big Ray Hernandez. And every Wednesday he's on the Next Level podcast live, I believe at 11 a.m. Also, you can find me on X and Instagram at TommyWonder19. Snapchat is #Wonder. Facebook.com/Tommy Wonder. And then at The Tommy Wonder is my TikTok and my other X. And then Big Vito Brand, you can find at Big Vito Brand on TikTok. You can find Big Vito and Noel, see what they're up to. The Dum Dum Duel and an Idiot is on YouTube. I know I keep saying it's coming, but it's coming. And you can watch the early release reflection video at Big Ray Hernandez on X.
And if this gets uploaded by A-Track Brown, if we're not on strike anymore, we'll be on the PWSO YouTube networks. Follow my brothers in arms, Billy Ray Valentine at Obi-Wan You Know Me, and of course the King of the Reactions at 8-Track Brown, the number 8 TRAC Brown, and of course follow my Xer at PWSO PRF, that's PWSO Prop. And again, I don't know if it's going to be in a week or in 2 weeks. Maybe I have to go into the labs and get some notes about Arn Anderson, but we're going to do the PWR Spotlight debate special. Who is the greatest television champion of all time? We already know the answer. That's Arn Anderson. And TW thinks he knows the answer, and that's Tully Blanchard. With that being said, I'm the professor. That's Mr. WWE, its own, the Iron Stomach one, Mr. Wonderful, Dr. Freaking Stein himself. Yay! Tommy Wonder saying good night, and we'll see you next time here at the PWR podcast at the Hameen Media Group at podbean.com. Peace!
Boom.
Shakalaka.